Welcome everyone to Web3 Founders, short snackable conversations for the next generation of founders. I'm your host, Josefina Bantienen, talking to you from Silicon Valley. And today's guest is a very special guest, Vassilis Tziokas, that he is the Web3 lead for Microsoft in the corporate business development team. Hi, Vassilis, how are you?
Hi, Josefina. I'm very good and very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. So I have my very first question is, how did you start at Web3?
I think as most people, we went down through a rabbit hole. So for me, it was like a few years ago when I'm pretty active on Twitter. And I'm mentioning that because Twitter is the place where most of the Web3 activity resides. Mm-hmm. So I was just immediately fascinated by the promise of decentralization and democratization. So I just started reading more about it, talking with some of the leading figures in the space. Actually, we're very lucky. I'm working for Microsoft, as you are, as you said, and there is one individual called Glenn Weil, who is one of the most prominent people in the Web3, and I was very lucky to meet him very early. So since then, I said to myself, hey, I think you need to work in Web3. So pretty much that's how the story started in 2019, I would say.
Love it. And what is the aspect that excites you the most about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of decentralization, although it's a little bit misunderstood, it is very, very appealing to me and my philosophy about life and society. I would say there is one thing that really gains my attention is the whole concept of DAOs. For those who don't know, DAOs is the acronym for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. So this idea of how you can build an organization ground up and you can literally share how you govern that organization with others through tokens and through coordination, something which is, again, sits very close to my heart. So if I had to pick one thing from Web3, DAOs would be the thing that excites me the most.
Love it. And you're in a very interesting position, right? Because you're in the intersection of like enterprise and Web3, right? That could seem from the outside like as opposites or like very far away industries, right? So what is that the enterprise industry sees in the potential in the Web3, right? Like what is that piece that is together and that you're trying to pull together, right?
Yeah, correct. And I think, first of all, it's a very good question because I think still for many people, they approach enterprise and Web3 as two antithetical things. Mm-hmm. And they're not. They're absolutely not, right? And I think the industry, the Web3 industry itself, understands it. And the Web2 industry understands it, if there is a Web2 industry. I don't want to use those terms. But so I think what enterprises see in Web3 is the idea and the power that they can use an open network, which is actually an open blockchain, or even a private blockchain in some cases, and somehow distribute governance, ownership, and use cases in a wider ecosystem. That's number one. Number two, they see a new field on how they can create value for customers. So let me give you an example from the B2C world, right? I think everybody is very familiar with the Starbucks use case of NFT loyalty programs. I mean, if you think about it, that's an amazingly new field where you can build new experiences for consumers. When loyalty programs were introduced like 2 decades ago, it was a revolution, right? The idea of having points in an airline and being able to redeem those points. So it was powerful, right? And most of the marketing, I would say, use cases now live under the hood of loyalty. So imagine, for example, what Web3 could do as a new field to experiment with. That's another idea. I think another thing they're seeing is that they're seeing more potential on how they can collaborate with each other, right? So, for example, that's the idea of a blockchain, how you can bring different entities under one roof, under the same roof, and build a use case on top of it. So I think we're just scratching the surface of what enterprise and Web3 can do together, but I think the future is definitely showing coexistence.
Yeah, I love it. And I love your view on that because it's totally true. And we were seeing it already in in real use cases. So that's great. And most of your day you're talking with founders and new startups, Web3 companies, Web3 startups. Like, what are you seeing from that side, right? Like, what is the interest from Web3 founders to work with enterprise?
Yeah. And again, I could say that I see an evolution on how they approach Web2, right? Or let's say traditional enterprises. They were a little bit more skeptical at the beginning, like last year. And I think they see that there's a really valuable coexistence between them. For example, what they see in companies like Microsoft or like other big cloud providers is see that they will have a power in scalability, in global coverage, in knowing enterprise very well. Yeah. Again, I was saying that I think we will discuss about Denver a little bit later during the discussion, but it's very interesting when you're trying to explain to Web3 startups how enterprise work, right? Because they approach the world in a very startup way, which is great and it's fine, which is very refreshing, but at the same time, enterprise is a completely different animal, right? You have to sell to different business decision makers. There is compliance, there is processes, there is RFPs, RFIs. It's a completely different world that uses different dynamics and different processes. So I think what they see in Web2 is scalability, coverage, knowledge of enterprise. And again, those two worlds are not distinct. In my because they're the same thing. At the end of the day, the consumer is a consumer, right? Josephine or Vassilis who are a customer of Starbucks, they can be also a customer of a Web3 company using Starbucks. So I don't see them as two universes. I do see them as one universe that they gradually and in an evolving way they will come closer together.
Totally. That's great. So when we're thinking about, enterprise acquiring this technology and just like start using this technology, what are the main challenges and the key challenges that we're seeing of Web2 companies starting to partner with Web3 companies? What is the main challenges there? Yeah.
Some of the things I mentioned before that is the other side of the coin. For example, when it comes to open blockchains, Ethereum, Solana, Cardano, all the big ones, right? Polygon. Of course, if you go to a bank or a manufacturer or a retailer and you say, hey, we'll use an open blockchain for your data, they become extremely scared. Right? Because again, we know that in data is actually where is the treasure of every enterprise, right? So it takes a lot of education and time for them to get familiar with the idea that putting them on an open blockchain means that it will still be safe, it will still be compliant, and it will still be theirs. I think there is this concept of ownership that scares many Web2 companies with the open blockchain, right? So one thing I would say is security is a problem. They are still not confident that it is secure and safe to put data on blockchain. The other thing what I see is, and this is not about missing, it's a known problem, is the problem of scalability. Right now we know that Ethereum, which is the biggest, I would say, blockchain in terms of usage, and the EVM blockchains, they cannot scale very well. For example, if you are MasterCard and you want to put all your credit card transactions on a chain, it will not scale, it will crash. Right? So when we're talking about millions of transactions, because that's what we're talking about in enterprise, we're talking about millions of transactions, either in banking or in manufacturing or in retail. Current blockchains cannot scale to that extent. Some of them can with some novel technologies like zero knowledge proof, but I would say scalability is the second, right? So I would say these are the two main problems. And then there is a third, which is more conceptual and philosophical, which is, again, this idea in Web3, do I own my data? Do I share my data? Who has my data? Again, I think it's an evolution. But from technical problems, I would say security / safety and scalability.
But we're optimistic, right? That we're getting into knowing how to overcome those, right?
Yes, absolutely. And as I said before, right, we see more L2s. L2s is layer 2 blockchains that are building on top of Ethereum of others, and they're using zero knowledge proof, they're using optimism. I don't want to get very technical, but we do see scalable solutions that can now lift up very demanding workloads. So that's one. And we also see more safe and more secure type of app chains, let's call them app chains, that provide this robust and also this sense of safety. And also, look, we need to be very open. We also see some private blockchains. And that's perfectly fine, right? Private blockchains, I know that for some people this is an oxymoron, but the way I see private blockchains is like a Web 2.5 type of use case, right? Where it's still a blockchain, but it has some centralized, I would say, characteristics. So I'm super optimistic about enterprise adopting blockchain for sure.
Love it. Love it. So you were in East Denver a week and a half ago, right? Like a few days ago. What are the key takeaways from that event?
Yeah, but first of all, it was a great event. And for the listeners of your podcast, well, I know that they're into Web3. Please try to make it next year. I think it was a very powerful event, and every year it becomes better. That's my first observation. Every year it becomes better. What I mean by better, of course, it means bigger and more professional, but also it means I could see that there was an increasing maturity in the audience, in the panels, in the conversations, right? A few years ago, it was all about Web3, we're going to change the world, and we don't care about Web2, and we are the pirates, blah, 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 which is fine. It's kind, and it's very, very romantic. But at the same time, this year I saw much more focus on enterprise, much more focus on user experience, much more focus on safety, much more focus on how we can connect fiat rails with crypto rails. So I saw that as a positive sign of maturity. Mm-hmm. Another thing I saw is I see more and more Web3 founders, companies asking for more regulation, which is great. I think, again, it's another sign of maturity, right?
Yeah.
I think it will give the Web3 industry this layer of legitimacy, if I may call it this way. So I would say increasing maturity, bigger audiences, ask for more regulation. And then I would say one more thing I saw is there were more discussions about stablecoins. Mm-hmm. This could be potentially the future of Web 2.5, as I call it, world. And the last thing I would say, Josefina, is, and you know that very well because we have worked together in some of those engagements. That's the interesting thing with Web3, right? Every week is different. Meaning, I was in Denver 2 weeks ago, and since then, we had the Silicon Valley Bank, and that had some problems with crypto. So, yes. You don't know what the everyday will bring. So again, it's a journey. It's an evolving story. But again, I am much more optimistic about the future, especially after Denver. I saw some very, very good signs there.
Love it. That's great. And yeah, when you were talking about the stable coins, I was going to refer to, SVB, like, okay, that was tied to, the stable coin too. So
yeah, just one more thing on the SVB. Yeah. I'm super happy and actually bullish on how the crypto industry reacted to SVB and Signature Bank, right? For those who are not following the market, I think crypto market in total, it reacted very well, right? It didn't take any impact on the crypto, I would say, market. And also on stablecoins. Look, Circle is currently the biggest stablecoin issuer. They reacted very transparently, very responsibly. Now the stablecoin USDC is pegged back to dollar. So, 2 years ago, the crypto market would be completely down. Again, going back to the idea of maturity, resilience, I'm very happy on how the market reacted.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that. I agree. It was good to see that happening the way it happened. So last thing, because, we do 15 minutes episodes here, so it's snackable for everyone. So what advice would you give to companies, startups that are just starting to explore the potential of Web3 technologies?
Yeah. I'm always very skeptical when I'm asked to give advice because I'm not a founder myself, and I have a huge respect for founders. At the end of the day, these are the people who are actually shaping the future. So, kudos to you guys in case you are listening. So I wouldn't say advice, but I would say here are some insights I have taken from talking to Web3 companies every day, right, as part of my job. I would say keep focusing on user value. Like, what is the value that you create to the end user? Right? Because many Web3 projects, many Web3 companies are very esoteric. We keep talking about FIs and L2s and L3s, and zero knowledge proof and optimism.
Yeah,
those are great, but nobody cares about them except from us, right? The community, right? Yeah. When you're a user, you just want your money to work. not have problems with the transaction, getting value from the application or the startup. So I would say focus on the user value, right? Being customer obsessed, which is a very fancy name of calling it. Customer obsessions and so is then number one, and number two is UX, right? Make it as easy as possible, right? Do not ask for people to sign in 3 different wallets, multi-signature, moving stable coins. Try to make it as easy as possible. So those two things are correlated. Clear value to the end user, clear UX, easy to use, and I think the adoption will come, right? I would say these are the two things. And the last thing, which keeps coming back to me every day as I'm talking with more and more companies and partners, is this is a field, because it's a very new field, Web3, it is very open to collaboration. What I mean by that is try to be open to partnering with other Web3 companies, or even Web2 companies, right? I see more and more this idea of 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah,
You join forces with someone else,
totally.
you can create incremental value, right? So be open to that, connect with other founders, join events. Do not be very secretive about what you're building. Be open. That's the ethos of Web3, right? Be open. That's the whole concept of Web3, open and permissionless, right? So try to live in those values, and I think you will be fine.
Amazing. I love that. Vassilis. Thank you so much. I think those are very valuable, advices. Even if you don't like to give advice, I think that was totally what the population in general needs, right? It's not about the early adopters, that it's us that we like and we are curious about new stuff, but it's about the big masses, right? So thank you for bringing that. And thank you so much for your time. This was
thank you for inviting me. It was great.
Yeah. So thank you.
Bye, Josefina.
Bye. Bye-bye.